Greetings, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Topic UFO. Tonight we have two guests for you, Rob and Trish MacGregor. They are both accomplished authors, and we're going to be talking about several different topics, although it seems to me, from what I've seen of Trish's and Rob's work, is that they all blend together somehow, and hopefully they will tell us about that. They have a new book that just came out in February of 2013 entitled Aliens in the Backyard. And we are going to be talking to them about that as well. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and bring them on. Rob, Trish, are you out there?
We are.
Yes, we are.
Hey, how are you guys tonight?
We're talking to you from the spaceship.
Oh, well, how's the view up there? I mean,
oh, just great.
It must be cooler than it is down here on Earth, I'll tell you that. I'm getting sick of this Nashville summers, I'll tell you. So, Rob, Trish, how did you two get involved in ufology? Let's start off there, because reading your backgrounds, you're into a lot of different things within the ufology world. But how did you originally get involved in it?
Well, we worked as freelance writers when we first met back in the mid-'80s, and we hooked up with Omni magazine, and we were writing for the antimatter section, which were several red pages in the center of the magazine that dealt with the paranormal and UFOs. And we were very fortunate at that time to get quite a few. We had a good editor who gave us quite a few assignments. We would come up with ideas, and so we would go to UFO conferences. We met Bud Hopkins, Betty Hill, and so that we had an interest already, but this just
solidified it
professionally.
And I got to ask you, because I ask every guest this: have you actually seen a UFO yourself?
We've both had a sighting.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but you know, it was mostly when mine happened when I was 16. I was in boarding school, sitting around after lights out with a bunch of other 16-year-old girls. There was no dope, no alcohol, and all of a sudden, through a window, I saw this light. I mean, it was a classic thing, you know, a light that's moving erratically across the sky and way too fast to be an airplane. And then another woman saw it, and so we were all just kind of gaping at this thing, and then it just zipped away.
Yeah, I had a sighting as well when I was about 9 years old. I was out, we lived on a dead end, and I was out in the intersection, very quiet, all by myself, about 9 o'clock, and I was wondering when my parents were going to call me in, because I usually wasn't out this late, and there was nobody else out, nobody to play with, and I was just standing there, and I remember looking up at the sky, seeing several lights, 6 or 7 lights, and they were red, green, blue, moving around erratically, and I was watching them fascinated. Then I got called in, and the next day my father told me there was reports on the radio about UFO sightings the previous night with those colored lights moving around. So I did see something.
Wow. Well, it sounds like you have both had your initiation. Personally, myself, I have yet to see one. That doesn't mean I don't believe in them, because I do. But it sure would be nice to have my own personal sighting. So one thing that we were planning on talking about tonight, which I'm very excited about, because I have been confused on this subject, I think, from the get-go. And that is the subject of synchronicity. One thing, when I was looking at your websites, I noticed that synchronicity is something that was written about by a Swiss scientist way back in 1949. Is that correct?
A Swiss psychiatrist, Carl Jung.
Ah, okay. I learn something new every day.
What? And actually, he wrote about it as in the foreword to the I Ching, which is a Chinese book of divination, and he did it for his friend Richard Wilhelm, who translated the thing. So, actually, Jung was really mystified how the toss of 6 coins could answer any question, much less enable you to come up with either 1 or 2 hexagrams that would address your question.
He also wrote one of the very early books on UFOs.
Yeah, he did, 1957.
Is that right? Yeah. So, in a nutshell, what is synchronicity? Is there an easy definition?
Really what it is meaningful coincidence. It's where an inner and outer event that are similar come together in a way that can't be explained by cause and effect, and it's meaningful to the observer, to the person who experiences it. Now here's a real clear example of one of the classic synchronicities. Mythologist Joseph Campbell lived in a 14th-story apartment in Manhattan. One day, I guess, he was sitting in his living room reading about the praying mantis, which was a hero symbol for the African Bushmen. All of a sudden, he felt a urge to open the window, and as he did, there was a praying mantis on the 14th floor right outside his window. And he said it was big and had the face of a Bushman. That's a synchronicity. No cause and effect, and it's meaningful to the person who experiences it.
So could it be considered something like deja vu, or is that completely different than synchronicity?
I think that's different. I mean, let's say you're thinking about, somebody you knew 30 years ago and you've lost touch, and then you log on to Facebook and you find a friend request from that person. That's also a synchronicity.
Okay, I see. So why is it that synchronicity seems to be becoming such a hot topic lately? Well,
part of it, I think that as people become aware of it, they experience more synchronicity, and they begin to realize. In our book, 7 Secrets of Synchronicity, we actually break it down to 7 major secrets, which has to do with, first becoming aware of it, then usually synchronicities are involved with your emotions, like during periods of great transition, marriage, divorce, death, those kind of things.
And go ahead. No, please go ahead.
I was to say the paranormal was the 3rd secret, but anyway, there's other secrets. Buy the book.
Yeah, and you've written a couple of books on synchronicity, correct?
Yes, we've written 7 Secrets of Synchronicity, and then Synchronicity and the Other Side.
And then the actual tagline on Aliens in the Backyard is UFO Encounters, Abductions, and Synchronicity. So this is actually our 3rd book about synchros.
Yeah, now let's talk about that a bit, because in looking at the description of the book, it's actually 4 separate stories, UFO experiences by 4 different people over many, many years. Looks like 1970 through 2011. And are you saying that those people all have something in common and this synchronicity ties them together somehow? Or am I off track on that?
That would make a good novel.
Yeah, they've all had synchronicities related to UFOs, and what we've been finding is that it's a common trait for people who have had abduction experiences before and mostly afterwards.
Or encounters too, just sightings.
Or encounters. And in fact, the reason we wrote this book, we've always wanted to write a book on UFOs for years, but we never knew how to. It's such a big topic. We never knew really how to get into it until a man from Quebec contacted us with his story. And the reason he contacted us, he and his wife had an extraordinary experience, and he was looking for answers afterwards, and he was having all kinds of synchronicities. People, friends, strangers, would mention UFOs to him. Nobody had ever mentioned UFOs to him. He was a total skeptic. He thought just UFOs were something that were in the movies and television, and they didn't really exist. And if they did, the U.S. military would have told us about it long ago. So
very naive, wasn't he?
kind of naive idea. But anyhow, that was his position. So one day he walked into a bookstore in Montreal where he works in middle management in an aeronautical corporation, and he usually doesn't go into bookstores because he reads all day. That's part of his work. And so in his spare time, he doesn't spend much time reading. But he walked into this bookstore. He picked up one book. It was the French edition of 7 Secrets of Synchronicity. So he took it home, started reading it, read a couple chapters, and then went on his computer and just typed in synchronicity and UFOs. And what came up was a blog that had a photo of something very similar to what he had seen. And then he looked at the blog and he realized the blog was by the authors of 7 Secrets of Synchronicity, Trish and I. And he said, at that point, he knew he had to contact us and tell us his story. And that's how we learned his story and gave us a focus for starting the book.
I see. So what we're saying here is that people that have experiences or abductions, it's after those activities that they seem to be more drawn into this synchronicity, or it comes into their life. Is that
not always?
Not always.
Sometimes, it's during. It can be before. It just depends on the experience.
Oh, okay.
With Charles Fontaine, he had many experiences afterwards. His next door neighbor, he was trying to find out if anybody else had seen what he saw in his backyard. He went over to the next door neighbors, and they were both up at that time. It happened very early in the morning, and the man said no, he hadn't looked out the back at all. And the wife said, "Charles, did you see a UFO?" And he said, "Why are you saying that? Why are you asking me that?" He said, "Because my cousin called me about 2 weeks ago. He's a medium, and said, you're going to see, you may see a UFO in your backyard pretty soon." And so I just laughed at it, she said, "But now you saw it, didn't you?" So things like that were happening to him all the time.
Explain what Charles' experience was.
Yeah, let me tell you about Charles' experience. His dog woke him up about 3 o'clock in the morning and was on the bed. The little dog was just barking and growling and acting very, very odd for this dog. And so finally he and his wife calmed the dog down, and they went back to sleep. And then about 4:45, Charles got up, which is his usual time for getting up because he lives in the countryside outside of Montreal and has to drive into work and take his daughter to college as well. And so he gets up and takes the dog out to the back porch, which he always did, let the dog out. But the dog wouldn't go out this time, was still acting kind of odd. And so he just nudged the dog with his foot, pushing him outside. And as he did so, that tripped the sensor of the lights in the back. And he looked, he turned it off then because he had glimpsed something. And he looked, and there were several lights, 7 or 8 lights, I think it was, that were beams of light, like inverted ice cream cones, hovering in the farmer's field behind his backyard. And there was movement inside these lights, colorful things moving around and moving from the earth up to something, a dark object above these cones of light. And he watched for 2-3 minutes, and he said, then he realized he had to get his wife out here to see this. So he woke her up and said, "Come out here, you have to see this." And so she joined him and saw these lights, these beams of light as well. And then he looks over to his right, and here is a UFO coming into the backyard, but it's moving vertically rather than horizontally,
like a coin on its rim.
Right.
Oh,
and it's
okay.
And it has lights along the edge that are circling around. And these lights fascinated him because they they had like O-rings that were moving around, blue O-rings inside these lights, and it was moving closer and closer to him. And so he turned to grab his dog to get in the house. The dog was surrounded by a gold light. And that's the last thing he remembered. The next thing he knows, he's taking a shower, and his wife is sound asleep in bed. And he doesn't know how he got to the shower and what happened. He had no memory. Something happened. He knew something had happened, but his memory was totally blank. Amazingly, he was still able to get ready and go to work and make it to work on time. So it wasn't a missing time experience. It was more like condensed time. Something happened to him.
A contraction.
Yeah, like a contraction of time. And so off he went to work, but he was not the same at work for that day and for weeks afterwards. He and his wife were experiencing serious headaches, depression, and confusion, and just a whole series of strange events were taking place in their life. So that's how that led to his eventually coming in contact with us.
Yeah. Where did this happen?
It happened in a small town about half an hour, 40 minutes or so outside of Montreal.
Montreal.
Yeah, in Quebec.
Now these light beams that he saw. So he thinks these beams were coming down from some type of small crafts, or were they just
maybe not necessarily? It might have been one craft.
Oh, okay.
And not too small either.
Kind of big.
Now, did his wife remember any of it?
Yes, she remembers it, and she, in fact, when she first came out there, she said to him, "Those are the same lights I saw about 2 weeks ago when I was driving home at night. I told you about this, and you were watching television. You thought I was talking about deer running across the road because I'm always afraid of hitting deer." And you just kind of nodded and didn't say anything, so we didn't talk about it. But I told you about this. So she had apparently had an experience herself earlier. And
well, her experience was strange.
Yeah.
I mean, she was on a road coming home at night, thought she saw something, and stopped and realized that there were like a couple of dozen deer that seemed to just be laying in this field where she had stopped. And then she saw the light.
Right. Well, first there was a light that swept by the car, and she thought it was going to, whatever it was going to hit her. And then she finds herself standing outside of the car, and she sees these beams of light, and she sees these deer laying down in the field. So she had quite an experience. So the aftermath experience for her was quite different, because Charles was very upset about what happened to him, but she was just wanting to put it behind her. She said, "I think
want to forget it."
Want to forget it. But she said, "We saw something that most people will never see, and we should just let it go at that." But Charles was relentless, and still that happened in February 28th, 2011. So not that long ago, but a couple years, more than 2 years ago now, and he's still pursuing it. Every day thinks about it, wondering what it was about.
Oh, I can only imagine. I mean, that's a life-changing event for sure. Now, there's 4 stories in this book, Aliens in the Backyard. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically 4 individuals who have had different sets of experiences. We also use some other shorter stories.
Yeah, there are other stories, but 4 that we focused on, longer stories.
And one of the commonalities, it appears, is that after these things have happened to these people, the synchronicities that followed changed their life.
Well, a lot of times it's almost as if the synchronicity occurs to help them understand,
to deal with it.
To deal with it. You know, I mean, it's like John Mack, the UFO the abduction researcher from Harvard, described the aftermath of these kinds of experiences as an ontological shock, where your worldview is just shattered. And you got to pick up the pieces somehow.
Yeah. Everything you've been taught, everything you've been led to believe is being challenged. Or
either that or it's destroyed.
Destroyed, right, yeah. Challenge would be the least of it.
For example, one evening, several weeks after Charles' experience, where he is still having trouble sleeping and headaches, he went to a pharmacy miles from his house. A pharmacy. He was on his way to visit a friend, so he stopped at this pharmacy to see if he could get some over-the-counter sleep medication. And so he was referred to the pharmacist, who came over to him and looked at him. And this pharmacist said, "Where did it happen, inside or outside?"
Oh, my
and he said,
God.
He said, "What are you talking about? Your experience?" And he was just blown away. This man, this pharmacist, who he'd never seen before, identified him as an abductee. And he himself was interested in the subject, and he had learned a lot about it from a microbiologist in Montreal, who he referred Charles to, and Charles eventually met with both of them, and they were helpful for him. So just things out of the blue like that were happening to him.
Now, I read somewhere in your information that there was a poll that was taken, and it showed that that there were millions of people that had this.
They fit the profile for abductees.
Yes, yes. Can you tell us a little bit about that, or they just what are they talking about there as far as profile for an abductee?
There were questions like, have you ever seen a ghost? Do you have missing time? Do you have inexplicable scars and markings on your body? Just it pretty much follows the information we've learned about in the last 30 years from people like Bud Hopkins and John Mack and Whitley Strieber.
Have you ever felt like you were floated out of bed? Have you ever sensed beings in the bedroom at night with you? Those kind of questions.
Those kind of creepy questions.
Yes. And we've had several people on this show that have experienced some, if not all of those. So,
but it's really quite extraordinary what they came up with, that when they crunched the numbers, that they figured 23 million
or 33,
23 or 33
well, whatever,
million,
a lot of million
of Americans have possibly had UFO encounters.
I'm hearing more and more about that what we think is a something that only happens every so often, it's starting to sound like now that, it is worldwide and, like you say, affects millions of people and they just don't know it.
Well, also, with the explosion of technology, you can, somebody in Serbia can take a picture of a UFO and it'll be on the internet and travel around the world in seconds.
Yeah.
So it's partly that, the information is just so quick.
So, Aliens in the Backyard, UFO Encounters, Abductions, and Synchronicity. Where can people pick this book up at?
Amazon.
Amazon.
That's the best place.
Okay.
Off Amazon.
Okay. And
or if you want the hardcover or the paperback, you can go to Crossroad Press. But Amazon has it too. So.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
And now I know it just came out here in February. What have you had any pertinent feedback from any of the readers yet, as far as them saying, "Oh my God, this has happened to me"? Or
yeah, we've actually gotten quite a few emails.
Wow.
Yeah, we've heard some strange stories from people.
Stranger than anything that's in our book.
Really?
Yeah.
Isn't that just amazing? Isn't that amazing?
And not everybody wants to talk about it. People are afraid they'll lose their job, or their spouse will divorce them, or whatever.
Absolutely.
One man who heard us on Coast to Coast emailed us and started telling us about his experiences as a lifelong abductee. But he shortly cut it off because he said as soon as he started that, he began getting calls from he was in Canada, also in Montreal, and he was getting calls from all over, several different countries, just calls coming in, strange noises, and then hang-ups, and he felt it was because he was talking to me. So he just ended the conversation at that point. I hadn't told anyone about it, so it's very unusual.
Yeah, that's a little spooky there.
Yeah, it is.
Well, it's people who are completely freaked out. They don't have anybody to talk to,
Well, yeah, I mean, one thing that like I said, I've talked to a few different abductees on this program, and one thing they say is what they find really therapeutic are these online support groups. Mm-hmm. Being able to talk to people that supposedly have experienced the same thing, because I mean, how do you talk to somebody about that has never experienced it? I mean,
one of the abductees in our book, who's a lifelong abductee, for years she would have these abduction experiences, and she never told her husband about them because she was, he wasn't anybody who would believe it.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's a real sense of isolation for some of these people.
Yep. And, that isolation, and that turns into depression, and then
right.
it's just a vicious circle and taking you down, that's for sure.
That same woman was actually abducted while driving her car with her son, following her husband, who was driving the moving van as they were moving from
Atlanta to
St. Augustine, Florida. And she ended up in a military base and surrounded by grays and uniformed officers with
assault weapons,
and with a couple UFOs hovering overhead. And
they threatened her, and she and her son were just sobbing. They didn't know what was going on. They said, if you ever, and then there was like garbled something or other, and she didn't understand what they were saying, except at the end they said, we'll get rid of your family, or whatever it was. And then suddenly, as soon as this event happened, she and her son were back in the car. She had no memory of getting back in the car. They were wandering through this grid of roads with no buildings, and they reach what seemed to be a 7-Eleven. Well, first of all, they found out they were on Warner Robins Air Force Base, and there are no convenience stores on Air Force bases. You have commissaries. But Connie went inside. She was completely exhausted, very confused, didn't have any idea how she was going to get back onto I-75, and said to the clerk, I got lost off I-75. How do I get back to the interstate? And the woman said, oh, will you get back? You leave the same way you came in, through the front guard gate. And Connie said, I didn't come in that way. But anyway, she eventually found her way back to I-75. And at this point, her husband and other two sons are like frantic. And by the time they got to St. Augustine, it took Connie and her youngest son 3 hours later, they pulled in. Wow. So, I mean, here was a case of missing time where the husband and other sons knew that the mother was missing.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Well, I tell you, the book sounds extremely fascinating. I definitely look forward to reading it because I don't know. It just seems like this abduction phenomenon seems to be getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
I think it is.
So we're starting to get a little low on time here, and I wanted to talk just briefly, if we could, regarding this AUTEC, this underwater military base. Is that what it is?
Yeah, most of AUTEC is a secret Navy base in the Bahamas, Andros Island. Most of it is, I think, 2/3 of it or 3/4 of it is underwater, actually, and a lot of experimentations. It's also called the Underwater Area 51. And the reason we talk about this in our book is one of the persons, one of the main characters, one of the four characters is a man named Bruce Gernon, who had a experience in the Bermuda Triangle.
In an airplane.
In an airplane, where he was flying from Andros Island. He and his father were looking to build a resort on Andros Island, and they had taken many trips out there. And so he and his father and a business partner were in the plane, and they left the island, and they came upon this lenticular cloud, this kind of lens-shaped cloud that was about 10 miles or so off the coast. And they went around this cloud, wanted to avoid it, continued flying, and he looks behind him, and this cloud suddenly is changing shape. It's growing and growing, expanding, and out with like 2 arms, and it's like chasing them. It's going as fast as they're going about 180 miles an hour, and this cloud is growing and chasing them, catches up to them, and they get out of it, catches up to them again, and finally they break free, and then they see another one just like it in front of them with his growing arms as well, and they find themselves trapped inside a donut hole about 15 miles wide, surrounded by these clouds that they went up to. He estimated they went up to 60,000 feet, and they flew down to the ocean, and they came right out of the ocean. So they were trapped in there, and then he sees a tunnel where the 2 arms are coming together, and he sees blue sky on the other side. So he decides that he wants to make it through that tunnel, and he flies right into it. And the clouds on the inside are rotating counterclockwise. All of the electronic equipment by this time is no longer working. The radio's not working. And everyone in the plane feels weightless, a sense of weightlessness. They had seatbelts on, but if they didn't have seatbelts on, they would have been floating up towards the roof of the plane. And that lasted for about 10, 15 seconds as they shot through to the other side. And then instead of blue sky, they're in this murky fog. And they're able to get back on the radio, contacting the Miami Tower, and they find out they are say we should be near Bimini, about 100 miles from Miami. And the tower said, no, there are no planes out there at all. And his father, who was a longtime pilot, was just very upset about, what do you mean you can't find us out here? And they're all wondering what was going on. And then suddenly there's radio silence for about a minute or two. And then they look, and the clouds break away from the plane, and they look down and they see an island. They think, oh, are we coming to Bimini? And they look, no, it's Miami Beach they're coming into. They moved like instantaneously almost 100 miles and found themselves coming over Miami Beach, and then flew up to West Palm Beach where they were landing. And so Bruce, for years and years, puzzled over this strange flight. And he thought it was some kind of unknown weather phenomena that had captured him and catapulted him. He thought it moved ahead in time, but now he's thinking that it was not a time travel experience, but what's the term?
An abduction.
Yeah,
an in-flight abduction.
Right. And
but see, what's interesting is Bruce has been on all these TV shows because he's one of the few people to have gone through the Bermuda Triangle in this fashion and survived to talk about it. So in 2009, UFO Hunters flew, they asked Rob and Bruce to go to Andros, which is where AUTEC is located, so they could kind of recreate what his flight had been about.
Oh, yes,
right.
Yes.
So we went out to Andros Island for UFO Hunters, and we were both interviewed for the show. And at one point, that same day that we were interviewed, they decided they wanted to, Bill Burns, who is sort of the head UFO hunter, wanted to see if they could get into the Navy base, into AUTEC, and interview the commander and have a tour. So we all drove over there, got out, and we're going to start walking towards the entrance. Well, suddenly a police car comes up and stops instead of pointing into the gate, he goes crosswise, like blocking the gate. A black helicopter comes up, starts hovering over our heads, making a lot of noise. And Bill just shook his head and said, "I don't think we're too welcome here."
No, I don't think so.
So we turned around and left. So here's the synchronicity.
And this one's weird.
This is strange. 4 months later, we are in Sarasota, Florida, on the west coast of Florida. We're helping our daughter move into her dorm room. It was her second year of college, I believe. And it was that Friday evening that we were staying there. We decided to go downtown to a bar where there was some music and have a couple drinks. And so just Trish and I went on our own. And the place was jam-packed. Full. The band was playing. It was full of people. There was one table, high-top table, that had 2 seats left. And we asked the people if they minded if we joined them. So they said fine. And so we gradually started talking to them. And it turns, who are we talking to? But the commander of AUTEC, the recently retired commander of AUTEC, who had been the commander when we were there trying to see him.
Now, that is truly freaky.
Yeah.
But that's a synchronicity.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing that synchronicity related to UFOs.
Well, obviously, you guys need to keep going because you've got this synchronicity going. Who knows what you'll unveil or find.
Now, you watch what's going to happen to you. You're going to hang up from this, and you're going to have a slew of synchronicities. That's how it works.
I'm going to keep my open mind, and if I do, I will let you know. I will let you know.
Good.
Very good.
Well, listen, Rob, Trish, we've come to the end of the show. I want to say thank you so much for taking time out. Your new book, Aliens in the Backyard, just sounds fantastic. I wanted to mention you have several websites here, or a couple anyway. www.synchronicity.com.
Right.
And then there's www.trishjmcgregor.com and robmcgregor.net.
And from SynchroSecrets website, there's a link to our blog, which is where we post daily synchronicities.
And I guess we haven't mentioned also, we are both novelists too. We've done, I think I've had 16 novels, and Trish has had twice that many, I believe.
Yeah, I see that you actually did 7 Indiana Jones novels. Is that correct?
Yes, I did. Yeah. I wrote The Last Crusade was the first one, which was based on a script. And then after that became a New York Times bestseller, Lucasfilm asked me if I'd like to write some original Indiana Jones novels, and I went on to write 6 of them.
Wow. What a nice life you guys lead. You get to write about what you want to write about. You get to investigate these awesome occurrences. Now you write together, you live together, you UFO hunt together. Do you ever get crazy just being together so much?
We have to have our separate moments.
I understand. I understand. I hear that.
But we're also each other's first editor, which is really valuable.
Absolutely. You can pass it by and give the first review. Huh? All right. Well, listen, Rob, Trish, thanks again.
Thanks, Steve, too.
We'll love to have you back sometime, and maybe we'll talk some more about this abduction and synchronicity, because it just seems, like I said, a growing phenomenon. Right?
Yeah, we have another one in the works called the Synchronicity Highway.
There you go. Well, when you're ready, let me know, and we'll talk about that one.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rick.
All right. Well, thank you guys, and have a great evening.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Right.
Open the door, you'll find the secret. To find the answer is to keep